Hope you guys got your last bids in, because looks like they all got snatched up. I'm not going to announce the winners of those later, 5:45. But before that, if somebody's talking near you, just go give them a little love peck on their shoulder, because that's the healthy way. Just touch them gently. That would be awesome. So it is my pleasure now to introduce our next session, which is on how a bill makes its way through Congress. And we were really tempted to just play. Oh no, never mind. Never mind. We were really not tempted to do nothing. That's my joke. And now I gotta find grenadine so I can know who I'm introducing and all that stuff. And so, yeah. Okay, here we are. Anyway, this how a bill becomes a law. I'm sure that Betty and Leilagh are going to tell you more about it, but I think that it's helpful for all of us to know how that happens. And most of us don't remember. I know I didn't remember, and I didn't really, Anyway, I won't out myself too much. So, I am excited to introduce you to Leilagh Boyle. Leilagh is a member of the Lane County CCL chapter. She says member, but she's really a co-leader. So she's really being humble there. Or maybe she feels like she's not doing enough like many of us. So the Lane County chapter is in Eugene, Oregon, and she is a high school science teacher, so we know it's going to be good. No pressure. She is an outdoor enthusiast and involved in a range of community activism. And I want to say her lovely sidekick, but that probably sounds really bad, but I love that word. Sidekick is just such a great word. Her supporter. So the artist, whose art you will see on the board in just a moment, Elizabeth Grant. In your schedule, her name is Betty, but I think she has a new name. She's known by Elizabeth now. Okay, Elizabeth, Betty, you choose. Choose your own adventure. So Elizabeth is a group leader, also another co-leader from Lane County in Eugene, and she's retired from a career in physical therapy, and she's an outdoor enthusiast as well, and is involved in a range of community activism, as well as CCL. So please give it up for these two beautiful ladies.
She asked us not to sing so that you would stay for Danny.
There's a song out there, and you can Google it if you haven't, about how a bill becomes a law. So if you it might be more entertaining than we are, but you got us right now. For 15 minutes, that's all. Hang in there.
So Betty made this wonderful flowchart diagram that we have had on display in the past. Here's a picture of it. Starting here.
Okay, well, Mark Reynolds did this first part for us this morning, so this is just a little repeat. But here's our bill, HR 763, yay, being introduced by Representative Deutsch, tries to say his name right, on January 24th, 2019, and it's technically put into the hopper on the desk of the House Clerk. Thank you. And then it's the House Speaker's job, so there's Nancy Pelosi, who chooses which committees get the bill. I don't know technically if she actually does all that herself, but it falls under her responsibility. So she chose to give it to Ways and Means, Foreign Affairs, and the Energy and Commerce Committee. So 3 committees, although, and still the website still says 3 committees, but Mark told us this morning it was also appropriations. So you will find out through the rest of this too that we're not experts at this. We're just trying to whet your interest in finding out more about it. So bear with us there, okay? And in this case, it was actually the Energy and Commerce, head of the Energy and Commerce Committee referred it to the Energy Subcommittee.
So within the energy subcommittee, the chairman will decide when they discuss it. They will hear from different experts, different leaders, different people within the committee to see how it will work and be applied. And then they decide if they don't take any action on it, then the bill will die. And if they decide they can come up with revisions and amendments to it, and then it will be ordered to be reported, or it will go back to the committee, and the committee decides that it will be, write it back up, so all of the changes that they've made to it and things that they've decided to add, they may order a clean bill, which will give it a new number, or just have the revisions at 763.
This is honestly my best artistic effort. So this is really how I draw. I do the cat with two balls and the little triangles on top. Whiskers coming out of that side. But we were under pressure, and so okay, I'll do this. Okay, so it looks like here it's suggesting that this bill became a clean bill, the way we can see it here anyway. So it's been given a new name. So it's still at that point in the subcommittee process, and so now it's gonna find its way onto the floor of the House. And often, and it's different, this is the House path, the Senate has another path. What was amazing to me when I looked at this a little bit is how many like rules and regulations and sort of, I don't know if they're good or not, but that's what it is. So you might have to go through the Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee sets up things like you can just debate for 45 minutes apiece, or this or that, things that can happen in terms of the debate. But there's all these, interestingly, there's all these ways to not go through the rules path. You can go around the rules if that's in the little green down here. You can bypass if 2/3 of the representatives vote for that. If you do something called discharge petition, go there right now. Or it's something called calendar Wednesdays. So there's certain Wednesdays, I think if I remember it's one Wednesday a month or something, that you can get it on the schedule, and then you bypass the Rules Committee. So I'm assuming by all the bypasses that you try to do that, because then there's not so many restrictions on the debate on the House floor. So it's on its way to getting on the full House calendar. I think you're on.
So it can go on one of 4 calendars in the order, or so the bill will get discussed on the floor as it's received. There's the union calendar that addresses bills, for bills that address money, corrections, bills that focus on changing out data in laws or rules. The House calendar, which is public bills that do not address money, or the private calendar, which is bills addressing a specific person or group. The House Speaker and the Majority Leader decide which calendar it's going to go to, and when it will be discussed.
All right, it's on the House floor, so it's being debated there. Lively debate, huh? This is so silly, really. It's being debated by the Committee of the Whole, and we're gonna pass it. Oh, full House vote. Yeah, so full House vote. Obviously, if they don't get the votes, it's not passed and it dies again. It can go back through, I think, all over again or something. But it's passed. Here we are. Don't we wish? I mean, yeah. Well, at the end, we'll go back to where it really is right now. That's our imagining in the future. Okay, so it's passed, but it's just passed the House, so it's sent off to the Senate for consideration. The Senate could just choose to vote on it and pass it or not, or they could say, well, we're going to write our own version of this. And so they sit down to write a similar version.
Like we had the first Senate. So if there's a similar bill in the Senate, they're going to work out the differences between the two bills, and then the two groups will come together, the House and the Senate, and it will need to be approved by both chambers. And if that happens, it makes its way to the president's desk. There are several options once it's on the president's desk. It can be signed by the president and then it becomes law. Yay! It can be not signed within 10 days, and if Congress is still in session, then it becomes a law. If Congress adjourns before those 10 days, it's called a pocket veto. So it does not become a law, but it's a way that the president doesn't have to actually formally veto it, or the president can veto it, which Congress can override with a 2/3 majority. If you would like to stay up on the progress of the bill, you can get email updates. So, and all of this information, well, where it is now, is on this congress.gov website. Every time that there's a new co-sponsor, you'll get an email. Anytime that it passes, when it passes committee, you'll get an email, and you'll get all kinds of updates.
And that's the red and white check thing and stuff.
QR code. It'll take you there.
Government track site. So the government track site shows that it's introduced. I think you have a slightly different date on it, one day later or something. That we did, and it's.
Microphone?
Yes, so the Gov site does show that it got introduced and that it got referred to these 3 committees. The last time we looked at it, it's just 3. Maybe there's a technical part. Maybe somebody knows that everything that has any money to do has to go to Appropriations Committee too, but they're not acknowledging it there. But then, so it's just sat there. Besides going to the Energy Subcommittee, it's still there. It's gaining a lot of co-sponsors, as we all know, but it really still has a pretty long way to go to become a bill. So we can't sit back on our laurels, I guess. Okay?
Yeah.
That's it. Awesome, now we are, wow, that's really loud now. What happened? Now we are primed and ready for Dr. Danny Richter, who's going to be joining us over Zoom. Thank you, ladies, by the way, Leilagh and Betty, for, yeah, exactly. Betty, I know you don't like your art, but I think it makes it really easy for me and many of us to just really make it easier to understand. So I love it.
It was supposed to be here, but it kind of had a snip fit on Friday night.
It's fine, it's
still a new change.
It's great on slides. So many of you know Danny. He's our Vice President of Government Affairs, and his primary responsibilities include serving as a lobby coach for new groups or groups with tricky meetings, discovering arguments against our policy and developing counter-arguments, interpreting new science, and reaching out to other organizations both at home and abroad to inform them about what Citizens Climate Education and Citizens Climate Lobby are doing. He has a PhD in oceanography from the Scripps Institute of Oceanography at UCSD, and before that he received his BS in environmental geoscience from the University of Notre Dame and his MS in earth science from UC San Diego. So there he is! Yay! Take it away, Dr. Danny.
All right, you guys ready for me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Got a little feedback.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I have a presentation. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be going through the details of the text. And so, first of all, we're going to go through the limited regulatory pause of the bill. We're then going to go over exemptions, including the agricultural and military exemptions. We're going to go over the rebate for fossil fuels overseas, and the 1, 2, 3 environmental integrity mechanisms which are built into the bill. We're also going to allow plenty of time for questions. Believe it or not, I'm gonna get through 1, 2, 3, and 4 in under 30 minutes, and then that'll be 15 minutes for questions. So, first of all, my learning goals here, I want to make sure that you have better clarity on what HR 763 says. I would like you to have familiarity with the specific legalese, and then, as I said, I want to allow plenty of time for questions. And so, first of all, we're going to dive right into the limited regulatory pause. For those of you that brought your bill text with you, it's section 8, pages 40 through 47. Feel free to mark up your copy. If you're like me, you carry it with you everywhere. If you don't have it with you, that's okay, because I put up a picture here and I pulled out the working bits over here on the left, and I will read these out loud. For those of you who didn't bring your much loved copies of HR 763. First of all, the pause on the regulation of fuels, section 330A and B, suspension of regulation of fuels and emissions based on greenhouse gas effects. Page 4113. Fuels, unless specifically authorized in section 202, 211, 213, or 231, or this section, if the carbon fees imposed by section 9902, that's the part that describes the fee, or 9908, that's the border adjustment of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 with respect to covered fuel, the administrator shall not enforce any rule limiting the emission of greenhouse gases from the combustion of that fuel under this act, or impose any requirement on any state to limit such emission on the basis of the emission's greenhouse gas effects. So now I am going to translate all of this. First, I'm going to get through all of the legalese. So this is B, which pertains to emissions. All the text is basically the same, except we're referring here to fluorinated greenhouse gases. So the first one, A, refers to fuels. That's coal, oil, and gas. The second one, B, refers to emissions of things that you're not burning. That is these fluorinated greenhouse gases. And the other thing I'll point out here is that it's the administrator, we're referring to the administrator of the EPA. And anytime it says the secretary in this bill text, it's referring to the secretary of the Treasury. So administrator is the administrator of the EPA, secretary is secretary of the Treasury. And here, shall not enforce any rule. It doesn't say they can't write a rule. It just says they can't enforce a rule. So that may come up later. And here we are, that was section A, section B, now we're into section C. Notwithstanding subsections A and B, nothing in this section limits the administrator's authority pursuant to any of the other provisions of this act to limit the emissions of any greenhouse gas because of any adverse impact on health or welfare other than its greenhouse gas effects. 2, the limiting emissions as described in paragraph 1 to consider the collateral benefits of limiting the emissions because of the greenhouse gas effects. 3, to limit the emission of black carbon or any other pollutant that is not a greenhouse gas that the administrator determines by rule as heat trapping properties. Or 4, to take any action with respect to any greenhouse gas other than limiting its emission, including A, monitoring, reporting, and record-keeping requirements, B, conducting or supporting investigations, and C, information collection. So I promised I would translate, so here's the translation. If there's a fee on it, you can't regulate it for the greenhouse gas emissions. And basically, this is trying to follow the principle of no double jeopardy. A fuel shouldn't have, an emission shouldn't have to pay for that emission and be regulated for that same emission. But you can regulate that same fuel or that same emission for anything else. Anything else. And even if it is the greenhouse gas that is making people sick or otherwise impacting their welfare, you can regulate it anyway. You can still count the benefits of fewer emissions for other regulations. So even if one important thing that the EPA does when writing regulations is to cost-benefit analysis, you can still include the benefits of reduced greenhouse gas emissions. You just can't regulate it unless it's impacting somebody's health or their welfare. And the take-home message is that this is an extremely limited pause. So that's the take-home message. I also want to dive into what about vehicle standards? So we're still in that section from page 40 to 47. This is still the regulatory pause section. But let's read this one. This is page 45, line 24, new motor vehicle and motor vehicle engines notwithstanding subsections A and B of section 330. Remember, those are the parts that did the pause, that paused fuels, that paused ability to enforce rules for fuels, the ability to enforce rules for emissions. But the administrator may limit the emission of any greenhouse gas, as defined in section 9901 of the Internal Revenue Code in 1986, on the basis of the emission's greenhouse gas effects, as defined in section 9901 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, from any class or classes of new motor vehicles or new motor vehicle engines subject to regulation under subsection A1 and B. Grant a waiver under section 209B1 for standards for the control of greenhouse gas emissions. So the translation here is though, even though it is regulating a covered fuel, talking about gasoline, this legislation is explicitly permitting keeping CAFE standards. So CAFE standards limit fuel efficiency standards for a variety of vehicles, and you also got in there because there's an ability to grant a waiver. This waiver is granted basically to California. Back in the 70s, California had a lot of really bad air. They were given a waiver to have more strict regulations for vehicles than the federal government. And so because California has a stricter standard, and because it's such a big market, 1 out of every 9 Americans actually lives in California, they effectively set the national standard. So we can keep CAFE, California can keep its waiver, California can continue to effectively set the national standard for cars. So that's what that part of the bill says. And this part is also important. What about methane? Section 33D, exception for certain greenhouse gas emissions, notwithstanding subsections A and B, again, those are the part that pause the ability to enforce rules. Nothing in this section limits the administrator's authority to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from, 1, sources that A, are subject to subpart 000 or 000A, we can just call that quad O, of Part 60 of Title 40 Code of Federal Regulations as an effect of January 1st, 2020, or would be subject to subpart O, quad O, or quad OA if such subpart applied regardless of the date on which construction, modification, or reconstruction of the source involved commenced. That's dense. But subsection quad O and quad OA refer to the ability to regulate methane systems, natural gas transportation systems. So what this is saying is that methane leakage that happens upstream of the fee collection point, or otherwise, if it's not bearing the fee, it's still subject to regulation. So here again, if it doesn't bear the fee, we can still regulate it. If it doesn't bear the fee, we can't regulate it. It's again that principle of no total jeopardy. And I want to back out here and provide a little perspective. So when we're talking about regulations for CO2, we're really talking about the Clean Air Act, which is, a very old bill. And there are really 5 places where you might say we're regulating greenhouse gas emissions. First is the renewable fuel standard. And this is something that says you can incorporate biofuels mix that into oil, but because this, sorry about that, there was something that fell. 2 children out in the living room. Renewable fuel standard, because the bill doesn't regulate biofuels, it shouldn't affect the renewable fuel standard at all. CAFE standards, as I pointed out, are already explicitly protected. Same thing with leaked methane. The only thing this really pauses the EPA's ability to do is to regulate new power plants for their CO2 emissions and to regulate existing power plants for their CO2 emissions. And I also want to, let's also talk about this. Going through the Clean Air Act, there's a couple of things you have to do. If you look at, by analogy, the ACE rule is what we have right now. That's the Affordable Clean Energy Rule. You're probably looking at 3 years. If a president were elected in 2021 who was interested in regulating greenhouse gases through the Clean Air Act, it would probably take 3 years to do that. Why is that? Because they first have to say, we want to issue a new rule. They have to issue the rule. There's a comment period. They have to rewrite based on all the comments that they have addressed. Then they have to issue a final rule. Same thing. That takes about 3 years. And because of the particular construction of the Clean Air Act, they have to issue a SIP, a state implementation plan. And so nothing actually bites until the states have formalized their plans, turned them into the federal government has approved them. That takes about another 3 years. So if you assume no court challenges, which is probably a bad assumption, and 2 consecutive Democratic presidential terms, the earliest we could get regulations on greenhouse gases from stationary sources, so from new power plants or from existing power plants, is probably 2027. That's the earliest. And what's to stop reversing these regulations in the 3rd or the 4th presidential term? Say there's another president who's elected after 8 years who doesn't want to do this anymore. There is nothing stopping that president from issuing a new rule, like the Affordable Clean Energy Rule is not really doing much. So that's an important consideration when thinking about the regulatory pause. What's the alternative? How long does it take? What's the timeline? The other thing that I want to provide here is ambition. So this is a table from a paper by MIT, the MIT Center for Energy and Environmental Policy Research. It's a working paper, so it hasn't gone through the peer review process, but still coming from MIT. Table 1, required carbon taxes in dollars per ton necessary to replace CAFE, the Clean Power Plan, and the Renewable Fuel Standard put together. So these researchers were looking at what carbon price could replace these 3 plans together, and they're circled in 2030. They looked at if that carbon price applied to all greenhouse gases, and it looked at if the carbon price applied to CO2 only. 2030, if we look at the upper bound, $36 for all greenhouse gases. So this bill, HR 763, effectively achieves in year 3, so 2023. And if we're looking at CO2 only, which this bill is not, it goes after other greenhouse gases, $58, which we effectively achieve in year 5. So that would be 2025. So carbon price is enables us to be a lot more ambitious than regulations are currently able to be. And here's a graph where you can see this, what you're looking at here. You've got on the left-hand axis percent of 2016 covered emissions starting at 100 going down to 0. On the x-axis, you've got years 2020 to 2050. That gray line, that's a wedge, on the top bound, you've got the IPCC 2 degrees centigrade target line. So that would be percent of covered emissions. You'd have to be below that to 2 degrees. And then at the bottom, you have the 1.5 degrees centigrade line. The green dots are the targets that are in Section 9903 of the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. And you can see that they're right in that wedge between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees. When the bill was being designed, this was before the October 2018 IPCC 1.5 degree centigrade report. So we were basing this on 2 degrees. And you can see that the clean power plant target is way, way up there. So that just really underlines it's hard to be super ambitious, or it has so far been proven to be difficult to be super ambitious in regulating greenhouse gases and getting a lot of emissions reductions. And that is partly to do with the particular language of the Clean Air Act. All regulations that the Clean Air Act empowers must have a sector-by-sector approach. So that means the transportation sector, the power sector, residential, agriculture, you can only do one at a time. And they require that state implementation plan. So all the states have to say, this is how we're going to implement this federal rule. And that makes it a 2-step process. First, the federal government issues a rule, then the states have to respond to that rule, say how we're going to do this. And this limits, as I think I pointed out, both the ambition and the timing. By contrast, HR 763 is an economy-wide approach, getting all sectors at once. And it applies equally to all states after just 9 months. So I don't think that the regulatory pause is pausing that much, is the point here. So let's move on to the next thing. I promised exemptions. That is in section 9902E, pages 11 through 12. And here we have it. So these are the 2 pictures. We'll start with the agricultural exemption. Agriculture, page 11, line 15, fuel. If any covered fuel or its derivative is used on a farm for a farming purpose, the Secretary, again, this is the Secretary of the Treasury, shall pay without interest to the ultimate payer of such covered fuel or its derivative the total amount of carbon fees previously paid upon that covered fuel or its derivative as specified by rule of the Secretary. And then here it defines farm, farming use, and farming purpose. The terms farm, farming use, and farming purpose shall have the respective meanings given in such terms under section 6420C. Other greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture, the carbon fee shall not be levied upon non-fossil fuel greenhouse gas emissions which occur on the farm. For the military, armed forces of the United States, if any covered fuel or its derivative is used by the armed forces of the United States as supplies for vessels of war, vehicles, or electrical power generation equipment, the Secretary shall pay without interest to the ultimate purchaser of such covered fuel or its derivative the total amount of carbon fees previously paid upon that covered fuel or its derivative as specified by rule of the Secretary. So what does this mean? This means that for farms, for agriculture, like the existing dyed diesel program, farmers can get a rebate for the fossil fuels they use on their farms for a farming purpose. So let me talk a little bit about the dyed diesel program. This is just like it sounds. Diesel used on farms currently around the country is dyed red. Literally, so if you were to take some and you were to pull it out, it would look red. The reason this exists is because the current exemption under the dyed diesel program for farms is that that farming equipment isn't on roads, and gas taxes are supposed to go to pay for roads. So the principle is, if you have a police officer, they pull over a truck, it's on a road, they get a syringe, they pull it out, they see the diesel is red, they can issue a ticket to that truck because it is using tax-exempt fuel on a road. It's a program that farmers are used to. They know where to get their dyed diesel. If they're using diesel and it's not dyed, they can get a rebate for that at the end of the year. It's something they're familiar with. That was the idea here. Biofuels and methane emissions from agriculture are not subject to the fee. Astute observers will note that was that last part of the agricultural exemption, that was the completely redundant bit of language there because it wasn't a covered fuel in the first place, but it was there just to be able to point to farmers and say, hey, look, double covered here. The federal government is not going to be trying to tax your biofuel use or your emissions from your cows. And for the military doesn't pay the carbon fee for military business. People living on base still have to pay the fee for their personal vehicles. So if you're living on base and you're just going in your Chevy Impala, you have to pay the fee on that. But if you're in a vessel of war, that you don't have to pay the fee. And so that's what that says. And so let's have a little bit of perspective. So for military spending, first of all, what is overseas, so all our military bases abroad, they wouldn't be subject to the fee anyway, because they're getting their fuel from those countries. So not subject to the fee. The military is already interested in low carbon alternatives, and the military is not particularly sensitive to market signals. The whole purpose of this is not to punish people. The purpose of this bill is to change behavior. And I just don't see the military changing their behavior because of the fee. I see, if they're subject to the fee, I see Congress just granting the appropriation for whatever they needed to keep our American sons and daughters safe. I don't see members of Congress exposing themselves to that charge. And how much is this? The part of military emissions that is domestic that would be exempted by this exemption is 0.6% of emissions. By an interesting coincidence, for agriculture, this also amounts to 0.6% of emissions. And remember, the rest of the economy is going to be subject to the fee. I don't see any reason why innovations from the rest of the country would not also be able to apply for farms. So as Tesla continues to innovate, I expect that those innovations will be applicable to farming equipment, to diesel trucks. I think that agriculture will be adopting them, even if they're not subject to the fee. So that's some perspective there. Next one, the rebate for fossil fuel exports. And so this one, this is the hardest one to do. And so Tamara asked me to do this, and I didn't promise to do this at first because this is devilishly complicated to really get right. And so I'm trying to do something as simple, I'm trying to do this as simple as I can, but there's a lot more background here, so I'll try and talk through this. So the text says 9908, section E2, covered fuels. Under regulations prescribed by the Secretary, in the case of a covered fuel produced in the United States with respect to which the fee under section 9902 is paid, there shall be allowed as a credit or refund without interest to any exporter of such covered fuels an amount equal to the excess, if any, of A, an amount equal to 1, the full fuel cycle greenhouse gas emissions of the covered fuel, multiplied by 2, the carbon D rate at the time the carbon D was paid upon the full fuel cycle greenhouse gas emissions of the covered fuel, of the exported covered fuel, over here really means minus. We've gone back with legislative council a couple of times saying this should be minus, and they just continue to say over. Very confusing. There should be minus. B, any total cost of carbon to be levied upon the covered fuel by its jurisdiction to which, and here I put in brackets and an asterisk. In the process of preparing for this, I actually discovered that it says carbon texted product. It should say covered fuel. So thanks to Tamara, I discovered a mistake. And so I can go back to the Deutsch office and we can get this mistake fixed in the next iteration of this bill. So even though this was thank you, Tamara. It's also really important to focus on this section. So we jumped ahead to section 9910, C3, suspension of the carbon border fee adjustment. Any part of the carbon border fee adjustment shall be suspended in whole or in part, A, by treaty or other international agreement which includes provisions for the suspension of the carbon border fee adjustment in whole or in part, any party signatory to the treaty or other international agreement. So let's translate that. First of all, it's basically with respect to the fuel, it's all even Steven. Wherever that fuel is getting sold in the United States or in another country, this bill is designed to make it even Steven. It pays the same amount as a fuel that is produced in that country. But that language, what it said basically is, if we're selling it abroad, we get to keep the money if that other jurisdiction has a price and there's no treaty. So we get to keep the money if there's no treaty. If there is a treaty, then we could assume it's just even, and we don't have to pay for the extra bureaucracy. And maybe they get to keep the money. So in the negotiations for that treaty formation, there's a possibility, we begin with the possibility that maybe that country can keep the money. And in effect, what this means is that's a carrot to the bargaining table, which makes global prices more likely. So this text is buried way deep in there, and I had to reread this many, many times, even though I've read this way more than I care to think about. There's a carrot in there and a stake to incentivize other countries to join us in forming treaties to agree on equivalence of carbon prices across borders. And so, again, let's go into some perspective here. I talked about a global carbon price. How likely is a global carbon price? And what you're looking at now, on the left is you have a table. This is off of Wikipedia, but it's based on International Monetary Fund estimates. I have gone directly to the International Monetary Fund website. It does line up with this. I'm not just getting my sources from Wikipedia. But number one, United States, we have the largest GDP, and of course, we don't have a carbon price. And what you're looking at on the right, this is from the excellent World Bank carbon pricing dashboard. If you go to their map, they keep up to date on which countries have an ETS, that's an emissions trading system, cap and trade, implemented or scheduled for implementation, a carbon tax implemented or scheduled for implementation. Normally when you look at this, you'll see some countries in yellow. I didn't do that. Yellow is they're talking about it. That wasn't serious enough, so I undid that. But now that's what you're looking at on the right world map. So let's go through it. So the United States, we do not have a carbon price. We all know that. That's what we're working on. China is next. They do have an emissions trading scheme implemented or scheduled for implementation. Japan, same deal. They have an ETS and they have a carbon tax. All the countries of the EU have an ETS. Some of them also have a carbon tax. So Germany, number 4, they've got that going. India, they do not have a carbon price, but they do have a tax on coal. So they do have a coal tax, but it doesn't count as a carbon price, so they're blank on the map. Next is the United Kingdom. They're part of the EU ETS, and they have a carbon tax. France, EU ETS, and a carbon tax. Italy, they're part of the EU ETS. Brazil, another blank spot. And Canada, of course, we know our neighbors up to the north, they have a backstop for provinces that's basically carbon fee and dividend. So of the top 10 countries, only 3 do not have a carbon price. The exceptions are the United States, India, and Brazil. And let's look at the next slide. What is the content? How big are these economies? So you can see the United States, we're about a quarter of the world economy. China is 15%. Germany is only 4.6%. Japan, 5.7%. Japan was number 3. United Kingdom, they should be at number 6, but this chart is different for some reason. They're at 3.3. Countries 6 to 10, you add it up, 12.8%. They're less than China. They're about half of what the United States GDP is. And countries 11 through 20 are about the same as countries 6 through 10. So why am I showing this to you? Why is this important? I want to remind you all that 80% of our imports in this country come from countries that already have a carbon price implemented or scheduled for implementation. The largest countries in the world are already pricing carbon. We are the biggest exception by far. I just want to remind everybody that we import more than we export. We have a trading balance. The countries that we import from tend to be the largest economies in the world, i.e. those that are also using the most fossil fuels. And the flip side of that is the same is true for countries we export to, the ones that already have a carbon price. So yes, we do rebate fossil fuels when they leave the country, but we are the laggard. Most of the rest of the world already has a carbon price, and there are no border adjustments. Countries are eating that price, and I think that they will be excited to be able to determine equivalence with the United States. All right, environmental integrity mechanisms. There are 3, as I said. The first one is the automatic trigger for a $15 increase, up from $10 per year. Number 2 is regulatory resumption, and number 3 is studies. So exceptions. So we're back into the part that creates the fee. Increased carbon fee rate after missed annual emissions reduction target. In the case of any year immediately following year for which the Secretary determines under 9903B that the actual emissions of greenhouse gases from covered fuels exceed the emissions reductions targeted for the previous year, paragraph 1B2 shall be applied by substituting 15 for the dollar amount otherwise in effect for the calendar year under such paragraph. And here's the 9903, this is the emissions reductions targets. These correlate with those green dots I showed you in that figure earlier. Here it is again. Translation here is the fee isn't hitting its targets, then the rate increases 50% faster than before. So instead of, so that's what it means. So those green dots, those don't change, it's just the price will increase by 50% more than it otherwise would have. So that's environmental integrity mechanism 1. Environmental integrity mechanism number 2 is the regulations come back. So we're back into section 8. Authority, if the administrator determines that the emissions reduction targets are not met, subsections A and B shall cease to apply. So remember, A and B, section A was the section that paused the ability to enforce rules on fuels. Section B paused the ability to enforce regulations on emissions. And B, the administrator shall issue such regulations as the administrator deems necessary to bring greenhouse gas emissions from covered fuels subject to taxation under section 9902, the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, to levels that are at or below the emissions reduction targets in section 9903A2 of such code, and require in such regulations that additional reductions in greenhouse gas emissions are achieved, fully compensate for any amount by which greenhouse gas emissions from covered fuels subject to taxation under section 9902 of such code have exceeded the targets in section 9903A2 of such code. Translation here is, if we don't make our emissions targets, the regulations come back. Not only do they come back, but for the first time, Congress gives the EPA authority to regulate greenhouse gases. Right now that relies on a Supreme Court decision. And the EPA not only has the authority, it is required to regulate to close the gap. And the gap is defined by science-based targets to clear 2 degrees centigrade. They're right there in the legislation. This has never happened before. If this passes, this just hasn't happened before. So that is this mitigates some of that seesawing I was talking about, administration to administration. It becomes much harder to do that. The last environmental targeting mechanism is studies, and because I'm sure you're all very tired of me reading legislative text by now, it does get rather old very quickly. There are 2 of them. Section 6, this is pages 36 to 38. There's a National Academy of Sciences report, and its goal is to say, is the fee working? Is the fee getting emissions down? Is it getting emissions down in all these different sectors of the economy? And it requires the National Academy of Sciences to make public recommendations to Congress. Section 7 is page 38 to 40, same basic idea, National Academy of Sciences report. Is the fee causing us to use biofuels and forests irresponsibly? So because there's no fee on biofuels, there is no fee on burning wood, are we cutting down forests in a way that's irresponsible? And then making a public recommendation to Congress. So this bill, this is the last environmental integrity mechanism. And that's what I wanted to share. So now we have time for questions.
Okay, so if you have a question, you can come up to this mic, and I would love a volunteer who will stand over there, and we'll form like we do at the National Conference, just 2 lines of people, if we have that many questions. Thanks, Danelle, you are awesome. So if you're on that side there, you can come to whichever mic you want to. So have at it, come on up. We won't bite the first time.
Hey Danny, this is Brian Atlee. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Brian.
Hey Danny, I'm wondering about, recently on the news, the European Union is thinking about doing a border adjustment. I was just curious on your thoughts on that.
I think it's hot. I want to see that border adjustment. As I mentioned, there are no countries that have a border adjustment, and their companies are being forced to eat the cost. And yet, 80% of our imports come from countries with a carbon price. So that means that these companies are eating that price, and they're still outselling American-produced goods here. And so that's proof that you can have a carbon price, you can even eat the cost for a lot of goods, and you can outsell American goods. And again, they're not only out-competing American goods, they're out-competing goods from other countries. 80% of our imports come from countries that have a carbon price. I think that if the EU does even have a credible threat of having a border adjustment for the carbon prices they already have, I think that gets Congress really, really looking at this, because American exports are going to be increasingly uncompetitive in the countries that do have a carbon price if they don't clean up their act. So I would be very excited to see that. I think that would be light a fire under Congress's butts. As I said, I think it would be hot.
Question number 2, I'm David Fouch from Seattle. I work for Boeing, so I have questions about aviation fuels and how this bill would affect that. And could you distinguish between domestic flights and international flights?
Yeah, so there's actually, in the regulatory pause section, there is something that deals specifically with aircraft emission standards. And it basically says that it will be to the International Civil Aviation Organization. But honestly, the details of that are probably going to have to be worked out in the rulemaking. So exactly what charge they have based on a plane coming in from one country, going to another country, where they fuel up, and what the carbon price is there. This bill does not provide that explicit direction. That was partly on purpose. So the theory, the legal theory that we were following to get in there is that we didn't want to be too explicit, because it can happen that when you're too explicit, when Congress is too explicit, they're basing their writing on something that ties the hands of rule makers. So this gets passed, Congress washes their hands of it, it goes through the rulemaking process, and if Congress is too explicit there, it might be that things change and they make a rule, their hands are tied making a rule that just doesn't make any sense. It makes things a lot more difficult for everybody, but because it's in the legislation, that's problematic. Because this legislation isn't specific, that means that instead of having their hands tied, the rule makers can just change the rule. If the situation changes, they can be more dynamic, they can keep costs low, and they can adjust. So for aviation fuels, I don't have a specific answer to that. That'd be the rulemaking process, and the bill, we were specifically vague on that to allow for that flexibility.
Hi, Catherine Oseen-Senda, also from Seattle. Can you talk about how the federal backstop in Canada is playing out right now in terms of popular support and what we can learn from that?
A little bit. So I got an update on this. So right now, the situation in Canada, so there are some provinces that have their own plan. And then there are some provinces who said they either didn't issue their plan, there was either some anxiety there was some tension, or there was some like, yeah, that's fine, federal government, you do it. I think that everybody's pretty happy with that. There's also a third category. There's hybrid plans where I think there's a province or two that said, yeah, federal government, you can do it, but now they're saying, actually, we want to tweak this in a way that works better for our province. And it has to do with the revenue allocation. And so for those of you who aren't as up to date as I think you said your name was Kathy, is that correct?
Catherine.
Catherine. As Catherine, the situation in Canada, the federal backstop is basically the Canadian dividend. The federal government will collect the fees, and then it will return all the revenue back to the province to be used as a per capita dividend. They will help the provinces do that, just like in the United States. Different provinces have different numbers of people, different numbers of infrastructure, it's easier or harder for some provinces to do that, just like in the United States. So there's a bit of a hybrid. My understanding is that it is popular, and it's becoming more popular, but I don't have specific numbers that I can share with you.
Hi, Danny. Eric Beans, outside Portland, 1st Congressional District in Oregon. Our Congresswoman resists, for the reasons you said, the regulatory pause, but you presented some very compelling counter-arguments against that. I'm curious, what kind of feedback have we received from left-leaning districts around the country when we present these counter-arguments to them? Do they still push back, or do they lie over and say, you're right, or do they screw you, we're going with an angle? What do they say?
That's a great question. I have to be careful here. It depends on the person. It has been my experience working with professionals that they are all in on the regs, and there's legitimate fear that if you touch the Clean Air Act at all, then you are opening it up to amendments, and that those amendments will undo deeper parts of the Clean Air Act. And so interfacing with those professionals, they haven't really read it. It's clear they haven't really read it, because what they're afraid of is not really what's in the bill. It's what somebody else might do to change that. And that's fine. That's part of the ecosystem of different approaches. But for me personally, that doesn't really do it, because the way I look at it, it takes too long, as I said, to get emissions reductions down. It's too uncertain, and the ambition just isn't there. And I think the other thing that is going on is that CCL is a climate-only organization. We are not an environmental organization, we are a climate organization. That's all we do. And if you're an environmental organization, your issues are not just climate, but there are other environmental priorities as well. Now for me, I obviously care about those other environmental priorities, but in my reality, they're going to get worse too if the climate continues to get worse. So in my opinion, we need to fix the climate. For them, that's not the case. I can only assume. Again, we value the entire ecosystem. They may be right, but I just don't see it. And I know that what is in here is good. You know, that was our role as we were helping members of Congress develop this, was to make sure that it was good and had environmental integrity. I think we did a good job. If it's not doing what we think it said, what we think it does, we want to fix that. But because of the timeline, because of the ambition that you can get with this, as compared to the way the Clean Air Act ties your hands, as I said, you know, you got to issue the rule, you got to go through the SIP, you got to go sector by sector. I much prefer this, and I'm willing to pause regulations until we prove that the fee is not working, which I don't think will happen.
Hello, my name's Justin Russell. I'm from Eugene, Oregon. I'm sure if this is a dumb question, as I'm not fully familiar with the legislative process. Assuming that this bill gets passed, is there any risk or any measures to prevent, say, a regressive future president from just dashing it instantly?
Not specifically. What do you mean?
Like, are there any checks and balances or ways to prevent someone regressive in power from canceling it once it's in place?
I don't think so. I mean, the president doesn't have the power of the purse, and you know, the only reason the president has so much power over regulations is because the president has power over the EPA, and the EPA, the Clean Act gives the EPA authority. So for this one, to make it more aggressive, you would have to stop the dividends, and I don't see a president who stops the dividends in any way, shape, or form, surviving that for any appreciable length of time. And I don't see how that president alternatively could zero out the fee, because that's Congress who does that. They have the constitutional authority. So I'm not aware of any way that a president could make this regressive. I don't see how that could happen given the way the text is written. I'm not omniscient. I could be wrong. I just don't see it.
Hey, Dady, I'm Bernard from Oregon District 2. And I want to make sure I understood one thing right. I understand the piece on, you know, putting the fee on there, but I thought I understood also that if you figure out a way to pull carbon out of the atmosphere, you can get the $15 a ton. As it's going up, you can get that revenue for taking carbon out of the atmosphere. Can you talk a little about that? And also, some of the what ifs. If I plant 20 trees, can I, you know, start getting this money? Or tell us a little more about that.
Sure, Bernard, that's a great question. That's section 9906 of the bill. It's on page 15. That's carbon capture and sequestration. You can get a credit if you capture emissions from covered fuels. You can't get a rebate if you're just capturing CO2 directly from the atmosphere. So what I understood you to be talking about is direct capture. So you mentioned trees. They're capturing CO2 directly from the atmosphere. And we don't know if that CO2 is from a fossil fuel plant that bore the fee, or if that CO2 has been in the atmosphere for decades. It doesn't bear the fee. And so out of a concern for making sure that there's no way to break the bank with this, that you can't get so good at carbon capture and sequestration that nobody gets any dividend, that people still have to pay the fee. It has to be from point sources. It has to be from fuels that are bearing the fee. Those are the only ones that are eligible for a rebate under this bill. It would have to be a separate either amendment or a separate piece of legislation that would incentivize direct capture, like what I think you're talking about.
Hey Danny, I'm Ryan from Seattle. What is the likelihood that if and when this bill passes, it will closely resemble what we currently have on paper? Like, how much is this probably going to change in the sausage factory of the political process?
Yeah, great question. I think that it will definitely, I think it will change, but I don't think it will change a huge amount. It will still be recognizable, is my sense. I think that the parts that are most likely to change are the part on the dividend. So I think that probably the most likely thing is that you have slightly less than 100% of the revenue going back to households, and they dedicate those funds to something else. That's probably the most likely thing. The other thing that's probably most likely to change is the regulatory adjustment. I can't begin to predict how that might change. And then maybe there's something fiddling with the fee rate of increase. Of course, in the market process, all sorts of bills can get tacked onto that that are not related. I can't even begin to predict that. But because we have so much coverage, because there are already so many co-sponsors, I think that it will be limited. I think it will be still recognizable. I think it will still do well what it says it will do now.
This might be the last question.
Gabrielle from Sandpoint, Idaho. I live in a very conservative area and rural, and forestry is a major industry, and I understand that there's just an agriculture exemption. So concerns that I hear a lot is from local loggers in particular and trucks, that they are disadvantaged in a rural area. If you could comment on that, I'd appreciate that.
Loggers. So I think that, yeah, because there's that definition, a farm use or farming purpose. If it's a tree farm, that would probably be okay. If they're growing on federal lands, probably not. But we're talking. And the concern for agriculture in general, there's the squeezes that they buy on a retail market and they sell on a commodities market. So they're price takers, not price makers. And so the concern of loggers would be, are the logs that they are cutting, are those, to the extent that they're a commodity, are they unfairly burdened? And so I don't know enough about the logging industry. I don't know enough about where that was being shipped. To the extent that those loggers are shipping their product domestically within the United States, then all the other loggers have to deal with the same thing. They have to deal with the same price, and they shouldn't be worried unless they're really dedicated to not adapting. To the extent that they are exporting a large portion of their wood abroad, then that could start to become a problem. But again, remember that most of those other countries in the world, the biggest economies, they already have some sort of carbon price. And so if they're importing wood from the United States, it might actually be an advantage that they have to deal with the carbon price. So I think that I would need to know more about where their product is going, but those are the things that I think that are relevant in that conversation. Where is the wood going? Is it staying domestic? If it's staying domestic, it shouldn't matter. I probably won't convince them, but it still shouldn't matter. If it's going international, it depends on where the biggest markets are. And the biggest markets are probably going to align with the wealthiest countries, and so it will probably be good at a certain point that they're coming from a country that also has a carbon price. But again, that will also be hard to talk to them about. So I think complicated answer, but I think that should at least give you hopefully a helpful framework with which to begin to think about this question anew and engage anew with these important constituents in your district.
Thank you, Danny. We really appreciate you making the time. Okay. Did it. That was awesome. Okay. turn me off. No, you didn't. Oh. So before I introduce our last speaker of the evening, I'm gonna play a quick little game with you guys. Okay. So it's one of my favorite camp games. It's not one of my favorites, but it's the one that fits the purpose that I'm trying to go for right now, which is to give you guys a little transition from just like taking this download of all this heavy information and now talking about jobs and innovation and economy and another relatively heavy topic. So we need a little transition. So here's the deal. I ask you a question and you say, no, how did she faint? Okay, that's the game, and then you'll get the rest. So it goes, hey, did you guys hear about Mrs. O'Malley? No, how did she faint? She fainted doing this. And now you guys do this with me. Okay. Stand up, stand up. Hey, did you guys hear about Mrs. O'Malley? No, how did she faint? She fainted doing this. Hey, did you guys hear about Mrs. O'Malley? No, how did she faint? She fainted doing this. It's actually supposed to be how'd she die, but that felt like a little politically incorrect, so I amended it. Hey, did you guys hear about Mrs. O'Malley? No, how did she faint? She fainted doing this. Nice. All right, thanks for amazing me. Oops. All right. With that, I'll try to read my notes here to introduce my favorite Phil. Okay, short. I love this. This is so easy. This is Dr. Phil. So Phil is the Director of Technology and Sustainability for Willamette Falls Paper Company and the former Linus Pauling Distinguished Engineer and Associate School Head for undergraduate programs at the Oregon State University School of Chemical Engineering, Bioengineering, and Environmental Engineering. That's as short as I can keep it. That's all I got.
You guys are fabulous. Later on I'm going to talk about why I'm involved in this, the little that I'm able to do, and my answer to that is going to be about you, so thanks. So I'm Phil Harding, and I stand between you and dinner. Your caffeine's coming down. Your appetite's going up, and then there's that chocolate cake. This is the biggest professional challenge I've ever faced, to keep you guys happy. But seriously, what I do hope to do in the next few tens of minutes is to make you happy by ways of seeing alternative means of describing to folks, whether it's other constituents or legislators, how a price on carbon makes good things happen. And the good things I'm going to talk about are innovation and investment. Money moving, people getting excited about their work. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So I'm a chemical engineer by training, and really the parts that, so I feel very humbled being here. Major imposter syndrome going on for me right now. Okay, but the things I do have are manufacturing experience and product development experience, all right? How to make things and how to decide what to make. And that's where I get really excited about the carbon price and the corresponding dividend. And I think that's why I'm here. So what I do now, so I just left Oregon State University after 12 years as a chemical engineering professor. Very tough decision. But I wanted to go back to making things. I'm an engineer, And I was lured in by this great opportunity to work with fabulous people. What you see here, see the laser pointer work okay? That's me in the workplace there. One of my fabulous colleagues, Joffer, our technical director. This is our team here. I won't name everybody, but that's a roll, high volume manufactured roll of paper containing agricultural waste. Part of the reason I was encouraged to leave. And then if you look, thanks so much, Ryan. Another hero. So we do a lot of great things at Wyoming Falls Paper Company. We have communications papers featuring recycled fiber, and then these exciting new grades. Oh, that funky projector. If anyone gets sick and needs to leave the room from looking at that weakness, just you're excused. But we're making paper grades using wheat straw fiber. Super, super exciting. I won't go into detail, but it's a great place to be. I'm excited for the change, but I do miss my students here. So I care because I'm just going to tell you now. My answer today is you guys. Is that the amount of passion and work, caring about other people, the social sensitivities, the brilliance, economic, technical. It's great. I look around the room. I have a former student in the room. In fact, it was a student that brought me into climate activity 6 years ago. One of those students, I had to work so hard to convince them that I was smarter than they were as their professor. And he got his name, Dan Golden, and he brought me into climate activity, first on the Oregon level and then gradually moved into CCL. I see a parent, there's Julie, a parent of a student, a colleague in the room, so it's just, I'm here because of that. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about carbon footprints and how, as an engineer, I see that they're very complicated. I want to convince you that we can transform that complication into kind of a confusing picture and really see it more as opportunity when you talk to people and you try to explain things. I'm going to talk about the REMI study. It's aged but very useful just for an introduction into jobs. For those of you that don't know what it is, it's a study that was done in 2014, and I'll talk about that a little bit, and I humbly present that, and we'll invite Jerry to add with more recent work as appropriate. Then I'm going to talk about how the carbon price and dividend will spur innovation and investment, and then we're going to do some interaction. You guys are going to get involved. That's how I'm going to keep you awake. All right. So I'm going to have you put yourself in the place of a variety of different roles and jobs and stuff, and think about what you might do if after 763 passes. So take 15 seconds and read this, please. Okay, thanks for your concentration. Caffeine's wearing off, but this is a little dated, but boy, it really speaks to me because of that complexity piece. And so in summary, like President Obama said in a slightly more profane version, LED light bulbs are not going to do it. And really, people are motivated by money. And so that says, okay, that speaks to me. Let's go through an example. Let's say I want to eat an orange. So here's a cute little kid. You're going to eat the orange. Well, part of your carbon footprint is going to be at home. You got to have a house to eat the orange, and you need shelter. Probably it's heated. You have to build it. It's concrete. But that's not it. You ask yourself, well, wait a second. Where did I buy the orange? So I talk about carbon footprint. What about the store that had to be built to satisfy my need to be able to go to the store and buy an orange? But no, wait, there's more. The shopping cart. Where was that built? What's that to their carbon footprint? And it goes on and on. All the transportation, shipping the oranges, going from rail to a truck, right? Not to mention driving. So it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming if you try to calculate your carbon footprint. Overwhelming. And we can't expect the layperson to do that and then us to be able to explain that. So now let's take a bigger picture. Oh yeah, here at the bottom, don't forget the seeds. Where were they? Where's the greenhouse? You know, the seeds, whatever, fertilizer, big carbon footprint, land preparation, workers. the workers at Harvest Oranges, their carbon footprint. That's all part of me eating an orange. Horrible, right? Let it go. Because we've got an answer. All right. So let it go, right? What a relief. We wring our hands over so much. Okay, a lot of you have probably seen this energy diagram for U.S. energy use, and we chemical engineers like to talk about black boxes and think about what goes in and what goes out, okay? So on the left, I apologize for the eye chart. On the left are energy sources, not to scale. Solar had to be made bigger to fit the text. Okay? In the lower left-hand corner, basically you see the fossil fuels, okay? On the right, this is your tax dollars at work, by the way, the National Labs product. Really beautiful, you'll see in a moment. You see energy use in that dark gray box. That right there is the energy that's actually used by us. The dark gray box. The light gray box is rejected energy. Lost forever. Well, not forever. But things like efficiencies, like an internal combustion engine got efficiency of about 23%, right? And on and on. Now, as an engineer, I know that some of that energy, Jeff and I talked about high quality energy, high quality heat, and how to get it from different processes. But this is, boy, we talk about carbon price. As an engineer, I get so excited about rejected energy. Look at that, you guys, 2/3 of it. Holy cow. All right, now let's look at the exciting internals here. Don't worry. It's gonna be okay. So what's going on here? Let's go through an example. And you can go and download this for every year. Just Google Lawrence Livermore National Labs U.S. energy usage, you'll get it. Beautiful picture. Beautiful picture. All right, so let's take a look at coal. Coal, where does it go? It comes out of the ground, it goes up, and we burn it for electricity generation. Some of it goes to industrial use, probably for boilers and things like that. Solar energy goes to a pretty small line, yellow, you know, like the sun, nice, but can't see it, but goes to electricity generation. Petroleum goes through transportation, but also for boilers and industry. There's some people in their residences, see the little lines? Each little line is something to be stressed out about or burn political capital, right? Trump passed a law or whatever. So what did candidates talk about? I listened to the February 17th Democratic debate, and I thought it would be cool when they rattled off all their ideas to map it here. Let's take a look. Mentioned. So I won't say who said which idea, we'll do that, but what I'm trying to do is identify who's really talking about addressing problems at the root cause. So our transmission system, battery technology storage, which would be between after electricity generation to provide there, reinstate EPA regulations, EV charging stations, right? Transportation. See how I'm mapping it there? See how it's a kind of a shotgun approach? Mileage standards. Invest in rail. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What about coal for making steel?
That would be in industrial. So coal for making steel would be that right there. What else do we hear mentioned? Close coal plants, then some general stuff, rejoin Paris, stop drilling. This is the chronological order in which it was mentioned. Invest in science, anti-corruption, and then, you guys heard it? Or, I missed it. There, carbon price and dividend was mentioned by a candidate. And then summarily dismissed by another candidate as not ambitious enough. Let it go. But what you see here is a smattering, right? When we know that the problem is in that lower left-hand corner. So why don't we address that? We want to address that directly. And that's kind of the messaging we have there. So we want to insert market forces here, right? And stop wringing our hands and burning political capital. So, all right, so transforming complications and opportunities. So this is just a kind of a pictorial way to show you. So we've got all this stuff we wring our hands about, all this stuff. What do we do? Science, teaching, data, energy, transportation, and the point of our bill is to, have a more succinct and elegant solution, right? And I want to take this to the next step, and I want to flip it around so that when you go out and communicate, you see the bill resulting in all of it. Now the problem is, when you switch that around for people, the text is confusing. It's also flipped. That can be overcome. Okay. So this is this is what happens in my mind when I walk around. Well, no, not the can't read part. When I think about pricing, I walk around and I see businesses, transportation, people working hard, people wanting to serve others, invest. This is what I see, is all these opportunities that are just waiting for market forces to engage them. And I'm hoping that we can work toward that with some specific examples. So, jobs. I'm going to talk about the REMI model. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, is Regional Economic Models Incorporated, and it's a fantastic study. An engineer like me tries to read it, pretends like I understand it all. I know the appendices and everything, but it's magnificent. And what it is, the dynamic economic model. What does that mean? That means that they predict how people's behaviors will change and how it will influence technology development and make a bunch of predictions that we used. So a lot of you probably have seen this, and again, this is dated and so it's a little dated, but the model predicts that a lot of jobs will be created, which flies in the face of a lot of concerns that people have. And I want to just for a minute drill into this a little bit. So if we look, I'm hoping you can read that text, but basically this is employment by industry. And if we look here, we see an anticipated drop in the mining and extraction activities. And then you can see where growth happens. And as they nicely explain in the report, that we move from low labor intensity jobs. So as a chemical engineer, when I think about an oil extraction facility or a petroleum refinery or something, magnificent technology, hardworking human beings, but low labor intensity, right? Because you're sitting there, you're watching a distributed control system, and billions of BTUs are coming out of the ground, energy, because of the tremendous energy density of fossil fuels coming out of the ground, and very low amount of labor required to do that, and it's addictive, as we know. So if I look at generalities, employment by industry, top gains, healthcare, construction, new facilities, localized manufacturing, I think, I would speculate. Then losses in extraction, air transportation, mining, employment, similar patterns, parenthetically in small font are the number of jobs, again, predicted 6 years ago, the positive and minus. A surprising thing for me was that the number of engineers drops by a small amount. But there's just a lot of engineers involved in the fossil fuel industry. So this surprised me, and I don't understand the guts of it. I know there's just brilliant people that did this study, but I personally would be very interested in understanding how they accounted for innovation and investment in making that. And we'll go through some examples that help you understand. So, did you want to take a picture of that? You got it? Okay, let me pause there, see any questions? Healthcare increased a lot. I don't know. Can anybody answer that?
Money they spend has everything to do with the dividend. People have more money to spend, their standard of living goes up, they can afford healthcare, they get healthcare, they can buy it for them.
Oh, that's good.
My right-hand person is explaining that you get the dividend, you got money, quality of life goes up, people spend money on healthcare. Thank you very much. All right, yeah.
Can you back one slide? Yeah. When we talk to labor unions, what I see is those gains in jobs are in lower, the retail and food services are lower income jobs, replacing relatively high paid jobs, and that's a concern that I'd like to hear everybody about.
I'm going to be honest with you. I pulled this out a week ago, and I saw that, and I thought the exact thing.
Yeah, I mean that's what
So I'm going to repeat. The question is that the jobs in retail, sales, and perhaps even health practitioners, right? You're talking about CNAs and things like that. The concern is that those are lower paying jobs. And that's a good question. So I'd invite anyone from the audience have a good answer to that. Jerry.
Yeah. No need to be concerned. GDP stays flat. The share of GDP or income going to labor should stay approximately flat. So there's going to be a big transition from polluting industries toward clean industries generally, but that's a good thing. That's what we need. There will be a loss of some high-paying jobs, some low-paying jobs. There'll be a gain of some high-paying jobs and some low. It's going to be a transition. There will be some pain. There will be a lot of gain too. And we get to stabilize climate risk. And we get a huge positive impact to health care generally, because there's going to be a great reduction in air pollution. This is a big win.
Thanks very much, Jerry.
Yeah.
A completely unrelated story is you're probably thinking, that guy looks good in a jacket. So what's funny is I reached in my pocket, and the last time I wore this damn thing was going to Washington, D.C. And here's my what do you call it, boarding pass, coming back from the conference in June. So I only dress up for you guys. Okay, so next, catalyzing innovation. So let's talk about first the stories that maybe don't make us as happy to lead into some happy stories that we're going to tell. So let's, an example, actually some guidelines first, sorry. So this is my opinion. Investors and workers. Now, in other talks I give, depending on the audience, I'll talk about engineers and scientists. But workers in general, right? Like if I'm a kid and I know that I can make money mowing lawns, I'm gonna go and figure it out, right? So investors and workers generally look for a way to satisfy customer needs, market needs. They see opportunities, they look for it, right? The fee and dividend does two things. It brings, this is really, really, really important, it brings predictability. You know what's gonna happen. So if you're deciding what to do with your money, what to do with your career, which job to interview for, you know, it really affects that. And price signals, of course, right? So the result of that is that investors are gonna place bets. When they place a bet, that means someone gets hired. That means someone is excited about what they're doing and they're gonna work harder. I really think that worker efficiency will dramatically go up because of this factor. People are gonna be excited about what they're doing. So here's an example. So I serve as a science advisor for a battery tech company called eChemion. And it's, I won't describe the technology, but they don't pay me. They gave me restricted shares, right? The reason I accept that is because we're gonna pass 763. So thank you. So when 763 passes, investors are gonna fall all over themselves to come work with us, all right? And, you know, I do this on the side, it's fun, there's good, hardworking people, and now there are others. But I hardly do anything, an hour or two a month. There's people that are working for 8 hours a day for free, because they believe in the technology.
Did we invest in this company?
The question is, can you invest in the company? No, I bought all the shares. Okay. There's a lot of companies like this. There's a lot of this going on. There's a lot of people that care deeply and they're fundamentally inspired like you guys are. And instead of doing the lobbying, they're working on technology. So let's go through a what if. All right. My good friend Chris Beatty, the redhead there, started a company called Trillium Fiber Fuels. And he was interested when China started ramping up the grass seed production. Willamette Valley farmers needed some options. And he said, well, that's perfect because there's probably going to be a price on carbon someday. And we're going to make cellulose and ethanol from grass. And he staffed up his team, made great progress. They spent $1 million, and the price of petroleum was unpredictable. It dropped, and he lost his ability to draw investors because they couldn't be convinced that the price of petroleum wasn't going to stay low. So what if that hadn't happened? What if? And I'll tell you right now, Chris is brilliant. That company would be operating in the Willamette Valley, and there would be, by now, probably 200 people working there. Okay, there's another one. Some of you, this is a favorite of some of you, is NuScale, which is a distributed, safe nuclear. We're not going to argue about the definition of safe, but it is. Yeah, we're just not going to go there. But it's an exciting technology at Oregon State, and in fact, one of my students there, working very hard, very inspired about having it an alternative to fossil fuels, working there, but boy, they've really struggled. They've struggled, and fossil fuel, unpredictable, and they've had to lay people off, right? Then they get some money, they bring people back on, they spend 3 months training them again, 9 months go by, lay some other people off. You know, it's not very efficient, right? Unpredictable. So what if there was a carbon price in place? What would happen to that technology development? So, all right, now we're going to do one together. You guys ready to wake up a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, question.
The state of Alaska gets a lot of its revenue to run the government from royalty oil. So this would be cool for them, would it not? Stable oil price? Render government better?
A stable oil price?
Yeah.
Predictable, stable.
Well.
Yeah. So I'd like it to be stable and through the roof high, if that's what you mean. But of course, what we advocate is a progressive and predictable increase. And the reason you want it to be predictable is so companies have a chance to respond, right? Because companies go out of business, we lose work, and we're not sitting here in this nice heated building. So we want it to be predictable, but not stable. Would everyone concur with that wording? Okay, so let's do one together. Fruit drying, Oregon fruit drying industry. This is a fruit dryer, and fruit goes in one end, comes out the other, and you've got natural gas burners that are heating and drying it. So, now, a predictable increase in fossil fuel cost. What might happen in this industry if that was to go? Solar what? Solar drying, good.
Yeah, there's some waste heat going up that stack, and it would be easy to recapture it right now.
Yeah.
You could probably put a number on it for us.
You're hired. So solar drying and waste heat coming up. So many CFM, that air there is probably, I don't know, 220 degrees or more. Yeah,
Replace it with nuclear heat.
Replace it with nuclear heat. I'm going to leave that one to you. Any other? Electric heating instead of gas. And like one of the speakers this morning, Jerry, I think, talked about depends where you live, right? If it's West Virginia, maybe not. But yes, absolutely. So if you're like where we are now, hydroelectric, wind, solar component, you go electric heaters suddenly become much more competitive. Excellent. What else? What?
Cogeneration?
Cogeneration, yeah, maybe you figure out something to do, again, going back to that waste, heat, waste energy. All right, so here's the chemical engineer. This is what jumps out. Okay, increasing thermal efficiency and control. So we talk about the waste heat. I just want to make sure there's little waste heat. So I'm gonna work really hard as an engineer to study what's going on there. Control, there's a field in chemical engineering called process control, where you're really aware of what's going in and what's going out, how much things are changing. People write computer codes and everything to kind of level it out. So there would be an industry there. Burner design, right? So the burners have some efficiency, probably pretty high, but people would be asking, could it be higher? They'd be asking and they'd be laying in beds thinking about it. Really? That's what I do. What else? There's your solar. So maybe people say, you know, I'm gonna see if I can build one that I can sell to people to do small scale. They have their own small plot. I see another hand go up. Yes.
What about a non-heating drying technology?
A non-heating drying technology, very good, like some kind of cryo vacuum thing. Yeah, absolutely. And the beauty of it is that when you sit down and calculate it, you're gonna figure it out based on a carbon footprint that's protected by 763, right? Good. Packing and shipping channel innovation. How do we pack it? How far do we ship it? Can we put more on, right? All this stuff's gonna happen. Yeah.
I'm not sure I get why it's any different than what you would do right now.
The question is, I don't get why it would be any different than what you do right now. So two end parts to that. One is you know something's gonna change, and two is you know it's gonna be more expensive. So it's, you know, much like the argument of which car are people gonna buy, right? I think all of us cringe at the overemphasis on gasoline prices, right? Because of that carbon footprint complexity. But if we just go with that example, you know, so I've owned a quad cab truck, by the way. My family and I, we're all EVs now. But I wasn't a bad guy. It was just free to drive that thing. And I had a lot of kids, you know, I was like, not that many, 3. I have a wife and 3 daughters, and that's part of the reason I'm here working with you guys. No, that sounded bad. Because I'm worried about their future. All right, this is too much fun. Oh, one more. There's one more hand up.
Oh, I was going to answer that question. I think the price of fossil fuels is it's artificially cheap because it's subsidized and they're not accounting for the negative externalities. Right? And so if we actually go in with something like the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, that price goes up to the point that it's no longer cheap enough to waste your heat and to use fuel in a wasteful way.
Thank you very much.
It makes sense to invest in it.
Yep. So, and to summarize, the price of fossil fuels does not reflect their true costs. And we want to make it reflect the true costs. So, now, you guys get to talk to each other. Okay, 763 passes. Right? Okay. What are you going to do the next day if you're an investment banker? Talk amongst yourselves.
A more experimental technology, like hold that and then put it into something I know is going to be a breakthrough, huge.
Interesting, so you're saying you would divest without having a big parade and signs. You just divest. Okay, what else? What else are you gonna do?
I talked to you about some shares in that battery.
Okay. I'll wait for that call.
I think I should shop around for engineers.
Shop around, good engineer with good patents. Go ahead and shout them out. Go ahead. No, not you. Well, you can't too, but no, the one in the green.
Okay, so I would have an easier time working with my isolated island community to do community composting and things like that, that will make us more self-sufficient.
As an investment banker, but we're focused on the investment banker. What I'm trying to get at is what you do. Sure, yeah, small banks start composting. Robin.
Yeah, when we talk about divestment, you can't talk about that without reinvestment.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Yeah, so, we've been talking about the international aspects of this as well. And we're not going to do this unless we really change where the money goes.
Yep.
Water follows water, money follows money. There are companies now that are investment companies that will help you invest in morally, environmentally, and labor.
So are you saying, so you're an investment banker. What are you going to do the next day? I'm literally asking you guys like what you would do. I'm trying to put yourself in the job.
I would make a loan to your cellulose.
Make a loan to the cellulose ethanol company. Brian.
I'm a very good investment banker, and I would see all this happening in Congress, and I would divest about 2 months ahead of everyone
He's
else.
divesting before Justin.
I would change the index trading funds. I was using to
Change the index trading funds, move to index trading. Okay, let's go one more and then we'll go to the next job.
We would research all the clean energy options and probably create a balanced portfolio.
Research clean energy options, create a balanced portfolio. Okay, now you're a manager at BP and have already started a renewable energy program. What are you going to do the next day? Go. Oh, you want to talk to each other?
So excited.
Okay, I heard hire. Who said hire? You're going to hire engineers, solar engineers. Double down. You're going to invest more. You're going to move your money. You're what? You're going to buy Phil Harding's startup. Yeah. Sell it off? I'll have a new jacket next year. 4 minutes.
From the VP?
Yeah. Quick.
Funding Republican senators.
Yeah, funding. Moving right along. Okay. All right. You're a car manufacturer. What are you gonna do? Invest in EV. Okay. Batteries. Drill down more. EVs. That battery technology, aerodynamics, right? Reducing the electrical wiring. I'm gonna try to, yeah, you're gonna try to win, have the best product. Okay, homeowner, considering insulating your attic. Get it done, right? That means I might move on from my battery company. I might start an insulating company because I know it's gonna be an explosion in jobs. People are gonna be like, I'm gonna insulate my attic before the costs go up. Okay, you're a local farmer struggling to compete with ag products from out of state. Yeah, hang in there. You're gonna say, wow, they're gonna start paying their carbon footprint. Okay, you're highly skilled. You're number one in your class in engineering, and you're trying to decide between oil and renewable. Right? So where are the best people gonna go? What's gonna be most effective? So I don't know if the Remy model accounts for that kind of stuff. I just get thrilled. You guys can feel it, right? I'm getting hot. Okay, now you're imagining me. You're a West Coast paper maker struggling to compete with paper mills in New York. I'm going to get more orders because the cost of shipping is going to change. So people are going to say, okay, we want locally made products, and shipping costs are going to, be truly reflective of that. So we got 1 minute left, and you can read this or not. But my hope is that I've helped you guys see how enthusiastic we can be about all the great things that are going to happen. Okay? It's not just counting and numbers and text. It's thrilling for human beings, in addition to saving the planet. So think about this for yourself, and when you go and talk to your legislator or you try to recruit other folks, especially young folks, Justin, tell them about all the good things that's going to happen, because I think it's going to be wonderful. I know it's going to be wonderful. So again, it's an honor to be here working with you guys. Thanks for everything you do. You're fabulous. You're a role model for me and for each other. So thanks. Have a great night.
I was going to stand down there, but I didn't know if you'd see me, so here I am. I just have a couple of things before you get to go eat and sleep and whatever you're going to do. I get to announce some silent auction winners, which is super exciting. So let's start with the fun stuff. Oh, they're right here. That's right. Bring them up, man. Okay, so loaf of the month gift card. I think we need drum rolls. Come on. And Walt and Kesty. Awesome. So you guys can pay by cash, check, or card back to Danella. Yes. Okay, Danella will go back there. Yes. You can also buy in the back if you happen to win, or if you don't happen to win and you feel like a loser, which you're not, but if you feel like that, and you want to party in your room or outside or wherever you're going, but not in your car, there is wine, there's a wine? No, beer and kombucha, and of course, tofurkey. Certificates, sorry, no tofurkey on the premises, not allowed. If you make a small donation, oh yeah, you can get a bookmark back there for $1. Bookmarks for $1. Okay, bead and crystal light catcher by our very own Barb Bingham. Barb, stand up. You make these beautiful things. Beautiful Barb makes beautiful beaded in Sitka, Alaska. And the winner is, come on, Jeff Field. Okay, trucker hat donated by Flipside Hats is Drew Alcozer. And we get another soft jersey cap by Flipside. We get Ola. Oh, jeez. It's the trucker hat is donated by Flipside, and it doesn't say a color. Soft jersey is light blue. Ola. Light blue. Yay! Okay, the other soft jersey cap, which is striped. Drum roll. Stripe. Cliff Hyatt from Alaska. And drum roll, please. Cooking lessons. Karen, whose last name is not on here. Yay! Karen, thank you. This is a very generous donation. Really appreciate that. And thank you to Dan Rubin's brother, whose name I can't remember, who donated this, who is a chef. Okay, the antique globe, which, as you will see if you look around, is no longer there because the winner absconded with it, but did pay us. Anne McInerney, our very lovely Mayor Anne. So that's pretty cool. 60-minute therapeutic massage, which I wish I had bid on because I would really like one of those right now. Lorna Lyons. You definitely deserve more, Lorna. You've been busting your butt. And sailing on the Willamette River, donated by Walman Keski. Carl Chu. And last, ask Walt. I bet you could just choose.
Sorry.
The nicest Willamette.
The boat doesn't travel.
Oh, you gotta just hang out in a boathouse. Okay, and last but definitely not least, the perfect brunch gift bag. Danella Broad! loaf man. So if you are leaving today and not coming back, we will be very sad. And please leave us your name tag holder, okay? Leave it on the registration table, please, okay? There are some meetups on the wall. It looks like nobody really wants to hang out with each other. That's cool. It's totally fine. We've been together all day. Some of us have been together for 3. It's totally cool. But if you still want to hang out with people, you can go put your names there. If you do, just out of curiosity, because I want to know if I should come back here or come downstairs or whatnot, who's sort of interested in playing some games? Raise them high, maybe enough to actually have a good time, 15 maybe. Okay, so meet in here, 7:30, if you want to play some games. We start at 8:30 tomorrow for registration. Program starts at 9. We get to hear from the Adrian Rafi. Where are you, Adrian? Are you still here? Adrian is not here, but he will be here at 8:55 tomorrow. So, you had a question?
Yeah, recordings of the sessions. Where can you access them?
Yeah, you need to give us at least a couple days, please. And we will make that announcement once we are totally sure. We're working on YouTube, oh, you know what? I can tell you, they will be on CCL Community, on our regional conference page, okay? We have a new repository for all things cool, like conference videos. So we will send that link out as a follow-up. When you give us your survey, we will give you your cool links and stuff. Maybe, if we're that organized, we will do it that way. Yeah.
Will the PowerPoints also be there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. PowerPoints will also be there. Other things that you might want to know that maybe we haven't announced? How long do you think I can let you just sit here in silence before you mute me on the bounty? Have a great evening. Maybe I'll see you, maybe not. See you tomorrow though, 9 a.m.